Okay. This is my first time in a silent conference. How many of you have been in a silent conference earlier? Wait. No, no, not this conference. Ever previously. Okay, okay. I see a few hands. Um, it's rather different to see so many folks in headphones, and I can hear my voice, but hopefully I'll get a show of hands if the audio fails. So I didn't hear a word of what Kritika said, but to just introduce myself, Bindu Kandarpa. I'm accountable for global banking technology for Standard Chartered in Bangalore. Um, Again, just to get a pulse of the audience that we have here, how many of you are from banking background? Fantastic. It's a good mix of banking and non-banking folks. So my objective for the next few minutes, 20 minutes, and I hope we have time for Q&A, is to make it real for us as technologists on what are the real emerging trends. There's a gazillion material we have on the web. I just tried to crystallize what I thought was the emerging trend in banking, and therefore, for us as technologists, what does it mean? What should be our focus areas? Where do we think we can bet our careers on to actually get into that depth of specialization or the breadth of domain expertise, and then hopefully we can have time for some Q&A as well. As we were talking about the topic fintech, it actually intrigued me only last night. I was wondering when fintech actually became a word in our lexicon. You look it up, it'll show up as a noun. And it's rather intriguing that fintech as a word was apparently first used in the 1980s by a pretty reputed business editor in the UK. So it never caught on till the height of the financial crisis, 2008, 2007. And it's a good story, and I'll kind of dwell on the context of fintech and the banking ecosystem a bit longer, and then we'll branch into the technical elements and the aspects that I think we can bet on. I dwell on the context on purpose so that we're all on the same page in terms of why certain technology trend is really as much in demand or going to be as much in demand as I think it will be. So coming back to the word fintech, right? 1980s, someone used it, it came, disappeared, and then fast forward 2007, as the financial crisis was baking, it's almost, if you think about it in a philosophical way, a culmination. It's a perfect storm cooking up, right? So you have mobile technology that's cooking up, and it's kind of in a good phase where it's real. We all have smartphones at the time. Then there's a financial crisis. Banks are really in tough times, and we always have rich people. We have the venture capitalists who are figuring out, yes, there is a risk. I don't want to invest in a certain sector, but where do I take the money? And that's when, fintech became more of an in thing, if you will. So all the venture capitalists were trying to sweep their money out and put it in this up and coming industry that we now call fintechs. So, if you look at the changing consumer base, changing investment landscape, it's phenomenal. Year on year, the numbers are just mind blowing. When I was looking at the stats, the amount of money that was in the fintech industry, investment-wise, was about 4 billion in 2010, and fast forward to 2018, it's now 41 billion globally. And then when you think of where you are, we in India, as consumers, we form the second largest base for any fintech product. India and China leading the way through. Obviously, we have such a huge population, younger population. We're all, very, very up and gung-ho about our willingness to adapt and change. So you have a consumer base. You're here right at the hotbed of that consumer base. Then you have booming investments, people who are really raring to put in more and more money, and that's a fantastic, again, culmination of sorts to to drive the right change in investment and behavior and whatnot. Some interesting numbers for you. Oh, it's this one. Yes. So because of this whole movement and the context that I've set, hopefully, each of these will start to kind of be self-explanatory, right? We are now thinking of banking the unbanked. For those of us in this part of the world, it's probably not as popular if you go to the West, right? In Africa, in the middle, in India, in the kind of geographies that the bank that I work for, it really has a USP, and there's a lot of unbanked. And what is happening as a natural outcome of this revolution, the digital revolution, where products are changing, business strategies are changing, technology, of course, is changing, and people mindset is changing. That's, to me, when I say fintech, that's what it all means. It all encompasses. So you're banking the unbanked. You have China and India leading the way. You have a projection of in India alone, solely, fintech investment scaling up to the levels of $31 billion. Now, put it in perspective, right? Globally, today, no, not today, 2018, it was $40 billion. And we know it's going to be astronomically high. And in India alone, expectation is by 2020, we'll be at 31 billion. So work the numbers out. So that's the potential of the fintech landscape system we're talking about. Now let's talk about us as people. I don't know how many of you were there at Padma Shri Warrior's keynote speaking session. Yeah, so she did mention a very interesting element. We talk about clients, we talk about customers, we talk about users, but the people at the end of the day. Right? We as people, we are benefactors of these fintech solutions. We as people, we are creating these solutions for us as people, right? So we are far more open. When I was younger, there's the concept of having a virtual bank, the concept of not going to a bank to do my deposits or to do my withdrawals was obviously unthinkable, right? I come from a time when cash is key. And I was a part of the generation where movement of cash transactions to, let's say, plastic and the credit cards that we know of was seemingly revolutionary, and we are obviously in a different phase altogether. Then we also are familiar with traditional lending. You go to a bank, you seek a loan. There's a loan officer, there is some other officer and whatnot. And fast forward, today, we're actually talking about peer-to-peer lending. Cut all the middlemen out. Cut all the noise out. So, if you think about it, it's a seismic shift in our expectation. We probably weren't asking these questions earlier. Now we are. Why should I? Why should I not? And all these behaviors are changing as well. Now, for those of us with asset management, consultants, there's asset advisors. They tell you what to do, how to kind of divest your investments. Gone are those days. It's far more real now that we have robo-advisors. There are reputed banks that have robo-advisors. And guess what? Many of these robo-advisors have far more millions and billions of dollars under their assets under management than a traditional asset manager would have. So, it's again unthinkable, even if we talked about it 5 years back. Credit cards, I talked about credit cards, right? I mean, I still have one. But not too long back, I think it was a couple of days back, I saw a story around FingoPay. How many of you have heard of FingoPay? Yeah, please do look them up. It's when we go out on a run and I want to make a purchase, I always have to carry my cash, some pennies, to just make a small transaction, right? Now FingoPay is apparently has gone live and in Manchester, and it's not an exaggeration if I personally want to go to that store in Manchester to actually experience it. It's biometric scanning through your finger, everything's linked. You just go, cashless, cardless, plasticless, and you're done. that's reality. They've actually gone live, and there's obviously a much bigger expansion plan. And if you also think about us as people, we're having the unbanked. Imagine the potential. Imagine the social good, the social positive impact it can have. So far, if you thought about banking, again, for those of us who are kind of familiar with certain aspects of banking, you kind of sometimes, I had that feeling when you go back home sometimes and you say, what am I really working for? Am I really making the rich richer? Is there any social good coming out of it? And obviously, there is obviously a separate forum for that conversation. But you see the direct social good of how the globe is becoming flat, how technology is becoming accessible, and you suddenly have the unbanked. That's adding a lot of market value. So if you think of M-Pesa, Kenya, 96% of the population uses that mobile app. And that mobile app alone has taken the credit, and deservingly so, of pulling at least 2% of the population out of extreme poverty. It's a fascinating story. And so the point I'm trying to make here is, we as people, we are changing. We as people, our mindsets are changing. And where does that leave us? So we have fintechs, we have people, and we obviously have traditional banks. So does it mean that one has to go away, one has to win, one has to lose? Absolutely not. Again, in the financial sector, it's an ongoing debate, right? Do fintechs swallow traditional banks? Do traditional banks take over fintechs? Is there a merger of sorts? Is there a partnership of sorts? Absolutely, we're heading towards very strong and healthy partnerships, right? So you have, let's say, brands like the many banks that we have here, who are sponsoring the event, with the kind of client base, with the kind of um, infrastructure that's just not possible to build overnight, right? When you talk about KYC, when you talk about CDD, your client due diligence processing, the kind of demand that's required is not possible for a fintech with fantastic ideas to scale up to. So, in real life, the bank that I work for, again, Standard Chartered, we partnered with Ant Financial to build out a blockchain solution for our anti-money laundering processing. And I also know ANZ has recently partnered with Moneythor for some of their efficiency boosting. So, and these are just two examples. There's so many more use cases that we have, where it's a super healthy partnership of traditional banks and fintechs coming together. Now, if I go back to the robo-advising bit that I was talking about, we have robo-advisors, and 5 years from now, the algorithms that they'll come out with, the accuracy that they'll come out with, will by far surpass the pool of asset managers that we may have. However, you still need that trust building with the client, trust building with our end user, and you still do need that end user element that, again, a traditional bank can offer. So it is a partnership that many banks have invested in, and will continue to grow. And we in Standard Chartered are super excited about the opportunities that these partnerships bring forward. All right, that's the scene setting, right? So we're all technologists. You can say, Bindu, so what? Fine. I've read this, I've read that. This is a new piece of information. So what for me as a technologist? So having been in the industry and seen the changes in the industry, I thought I'd leave you guys with some thoughts, reflections on where you think you want to invest. And again, like I said, bust the myth about financial industry being unrelatable, being irrelevant, or just being too complex for your comprehension. Absolutely not the case. We are here to solve problems. We are here to make a difference, and obviously, as a result, meet our shareholder expectations. But but coming back to us as technologists, where are we headed? I think API-enabled architectures, absolutely key. Think API is a buzzword, right? Anything that you build, and this may be true for all areas, more so for banking than anywhere else, in my opinion. You want to be platform agnostic. You want to be data centric, data domain centric, and service orientated. So you can say this service is offered on platform A today. It could be platform B tomorrow. It could be something else tomorrow. But how is my piece of work really reusable, extensible, set out in an API-enabled architecture is key. Right? How many of you have heard the word open banking? Yeah. So again, please do look it up. It's again a very interesting discussion in the industry today. When as the world shrinks, as the very definition of who's finance. I mean, if you're talking about Apple Pay, Google Pay, these are not traditional finance companies, but obviously they're getting into the hot payment market. So what we want to think about is a solution, an ecosystem where our solutions are extensible, and this expands far beyond your traditional enterprise definition, right? So whatever you're doing, of course you want to keep it platform agnostic. Of course you want to keep it enterprise centric, but think beyond. And open banking is one of those concepts where, of course, there's a regulatory obligation, but it's just the right thing to do, and it'll increasingly become the norm. Although the debate is kind of, in my opinion, well at the midpoint. So if you said, if you did your homework on how to get better at building API-centric solutions, I think you will really go places. The next bit is human-centered design and user experience. It's no longer about a user interface. Traditionally, in banking, people talked about their products. Oh, I'm a specialist in credit card. There you go, you, Miss So-and-so, take my credit card as a product for you. But now we have to think the other way around, right? We have to problem solve around people, not problem solve around our products. It's a seismic shift in how we design our solutions. User experience, I know there were a couple of topics in the conference as well. But again, if you're into user experience and human-centric design, again, go well into the depth of it, because I think it'll be really, really hot. Data. Data is a new currency. We seek data. We leverage data to cross-sell, upsell, and make sure the footprint is getting better, not just for the beneficiary, but for us as an organization as well. But with the power of data comes the responsibility of protecting data as well. So again, this is each one of these bullets, in my opinion, is a tech talk in itself. But if you were into data management, if you're saying, okay, you know what, you want to build the Google Maps of data. There's organizations have data flowing through, but there is no insights, there's no information. It's just data. If you're good at anything around data management, data lineage, data DQM, data quality, and of course there's a hopefully lightweight governance around it. That's again a hot topic, right? Of how you tag your data, how you protect it, and how you draw some insights out of it. Cybersecurity is there to stay, right? So if you're a specialist or if you have a thing for cybersecurity, please invest in it. It's hot, it'll get hotter, and I don't see it cooling off at all. Similarly, managing risks, risk specialists, especially in industries like banking where we're regulated, we do want to make sure what is the risk that we're taking on. So specialists within technology who have a flair for risk appetite, risk measurement, go for it. spend time on it, invest, and you will be pretty hot. And this bullet is overloaded. It's around AI, ML, blockchain, biometric technologies. Each piece is, again, a science in itself, but it cannot be understated how important it is for us to be, if not experts in ML algos, at least to be aware, right? So, some of the poster presentations were really impressive. Everything around AI, ML, and I told myself, I wish I was 20 years younger to go back and do these courses and learn things a different way. And of course, there's DevOps, which is evergreen. In this day and age, we have attention spans which are very, very small, right? I open my email, forget what I'm trying to do, come back, and then go back to it. And I'm sure it happens to everybody. So making sure that when the idea comes, it's struck hot, which means we cut down our time to market, which means heavy investment, heavy expertise in DevOps. We talk about AIOps, we talk about DevSecOps, fascinating concepts. Please, again, stay up to date, because these are skills that I know the evolving banking domain will need extremely strongly. It's a crime if I talk solely about technologies, and I know it's tech talks. The emotional quotient is equally important, and part of us as people, we talk about upskilling a lot, and I do think it's reasonably important to learn when to unlearn and when to relearn. There are many times you go back and you revisit a topic a few quarters later, and you realize, oh yeah, I didn't get this aspect about it. So relearning and unlearning, I'd peg them as equally important to upskilling yourselves. So please do take time and make it happen. And influencing without authority. You don't necessarily in life have the authority all the time. And most of the time you don't, actually. So how do you make sure that you're able to influence the other person's thought with your ideas and still get the objective outcome? I mean, the problem with the emotional aspects of this slide is there's no one course or one college that offers it all. It's us being self-aware. It's us being adaptable and learning from our own experiences. And obviously, the last one, which is not the least, is operating in ambiguity. How do you think all these products came into being? It's not that they had a very clear finish line marked, right? You kind of know you're getting into the ambiguous zone. You know you're getting into the gray. You still march ahead, knowing fully well that things will get clearer, or when to take a different direction. So in all our organizations, I'm sure we talk about agile mindset and whatnot, but really this is the crux of it all. So my hope is that we take the time out, we bust any myths around fintechs, financial sector, the technology demands of financial sectors, the realities of the financial sector, and we build the talent for tomorrow with the pillars that I've identified. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Bindu.
Yeah, now I'm wired. Can you speak up, please? Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Aishwarya. I work as a software engineer for JP Morgan and Chase. So as a technologist, the one big challenge I face is the domain knowledge, right? Because I have learned what to do with the technology, how to deliver the technology products and all that, but I'm not satisfied unless I understand what user really want. So that domain knowledge gap comes always when I try to deliver it better. So I want your suggestion that how can I upskill my domain knowledge as a technologist?
Sure. That's a fantastic question and a very real one for those of us in India, right?
Yeah.
Because in the case of your bank, I assume most of the action is happening in the West, and therefore, so my mantra, and this is something that I've operated even in my really, really early days of being a developer, is I've always wanted to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I know it's a very easy thing to say, right? So in our traditional mode of working, there's a Jira, there's a task. You just you kind of soaking the fun in. But I would just say, do not rest till you actually get an answer that makes sense to you in your ecosystem about why you're doing what you're doing, right? And when we talked about human-centric design, we talked about designing around people, not around the problems, right? So unless you are able to actually hear from credible voices around what is it that you're trying to do, why you have to increase, let's say, a throughput of a certain process from X to Y, and what is a business outcome that's coming out of it. And it's a really difficult conversation. But I would just say persevere, and you will invariably build that functional expertise, piece by piece. And I'm sure you'll have lots of experts around you, and having those, coffee conversations, corridor conversations with those experts, and being very, very insistent on, I need to know what is the outcome that my piece of work is delivering, will definitely take you a long way.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We'll
ma'am.
probably just take one more question, if there's anything. There's one at the last.
Hi, I'm Srimati from BNY Mellon.
Can you speak up, please?
Hi, yeah, I'm Srimati from BNY Mellon.
Yes.
Okay, and I have a question about the traditional banks as such. I understand that we are trying to adopt a lot of technologies, bring FinTech as part of the traditional banks itself. I mean, we do it too in BNY Mellon. So I want to understand in your perspective, how would the banks themselves transform? Because ours is like 250 plus years old organization. I'm sure a lot of other banks are also similarly, really old. So what would be the, the role of the banks, the traditional banks as such, in this transforming FinTech times?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a far-reaching question. It's traditional banks obviously bring a bottom line, like I said, the client base, the infrastructure, the scale, the breadth. Where we struggle, and I say we because it's like you said, a reasonably universal problem, is not being able to be as nimble, right, or as quick as our fintech partners, right? And there's an acknowledgement that with the years of builds and build outs that have happened and the varying strategies, there's far more layers that any of our traditional bank output needs to cross, as opposed to what a fintech may have to do, right? But I do think there is an absolutely key role for us as traditional banks to play in this sphere, and that's echoing on all the partnerships that we're trying to build as well, right? If you talk about again the same examples that I picked up, client due diligence, know your customer. These processes need a lot of investment, a lot of heavy duty uplift that fresh in the street fintech may not be able to is what I say, till again a new solution comes up, right? So the breadth of the functional experience that traditional banks sit on, to the savviness and the nimbleness that fintechs bring, the combination is what will be a winning combination for us as people, in my opinion. So I do not subscribe to the notion that at some point these traditional banks will go away. We will change drastically, for sure, but we're there to stay.